latest news, national issues, the political scene, and conversations with prominent personalities. All these firsthand at the forefront. The arrest of former President Rodrigo Duterte by the International Criminal Court yesterday marks an unprecedented moment in Philippine history, igniting intense debates on justice, sovereignty, and accountability. As the legal process unfolds, the nation watches closely, with supporters decrying foreign intervention and critics demanding accountability for the lives lost in the war on drugs. The case raises complex jurisdictional and diplomatic challenges, testing the Philippines' stance on international law and cooperation with the ICC. What comes next for former President Duterte, the Philippine government, and the pursuit of justice in the global stage? With us this morning via Zoom is the Dean of the College of Law of La Salle, Bacolod City, Ralph Sarmiento. Good morning, Dean Ralph.
Good morning, Karen, and to all your viewers.
Dean Ralph, let's start with the basics. What is the case against former President Duterte in the ICC?
Well, basically, the case is he's being charged for the crime against humanity of murder, which is under the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court, particularly under the Rome Statute, Article 7, subparagraph A, subparagraph 1 of the Rome Statute. So it's a crime against humanity, and specifically, it's the crime of murder.
Dean Ralph, is there a distinction here when it comes to participation? There's here in the Philippines, in criminal law, you can be a direct participant in the crime or indirect as well. When you say murder, we look at the history and you have former heads of state like, of course, in Germany, Hitler, where the direct participation is more evident. But in this case, it was a campaign against drugs, which some voters also supported when they voted for President Duterte back then. So in this case, can you classify what type of participation there is and if there's any distinction in the ICC?
Yes. Under the Rome Statute, there are two possibilities where a person can incur criminal responsibility. Under Article 25, there can be individual criminal responsibility. For example, when you order, when you instigate, you abet the commission of the crimes. Or there can also be command responsibility or superior responsibility under Article 28 of the Rome Statute. So command responsibility, if you are a military commander, that's under Article 28, subparagraph A of the Rome Statute. Or there can also be superior responsibility if you are not a military commander, and that's under Article 28, subparagraph 2 of the Rome Statute.
Okay, so in this case, where does this fall under? Is it under command responsibility?
I think there are the charges consist basically of alternative charges. So there is the individual criminal responsibility for ordering, aiding, and abetting the commission of the crime against humanity of murder. At the same time, there's an alternative charge under the principle of superior responsibility and command responsibility.
And in your opinion, how strong is the case when it comes to, as you said, command responsibility or any of these categories of participation?
Well, of course, that's a matter of evidence. No? I'm not privy to the specific evidence. We're all dependent on what we see, on what is being presented on media, what we read on on articles. But I believe that based on the decision of the pretrial chamber, it was decided that there is sufficient evidence to for the charges against former President Duterte to hold under the for the crime against humanity of murder. So either for the crime of for the direct responsibility of ordering, aiding, and abetting, or superior responsibility. Under command responsibility, what's important only is that the perpetrator, the person charged, knew or should have known that crime against humanity of murder were being committed, and he failed to take the necessary measures either to investigate or to put the persons responsible to justice.
Would this really fall under crimes against humanity? when you have, for example, as a head of state, a campaign against a peace and order situation, for example, in this case, a campaign against drugs, against drug pushers or users, would that qualify as crimes against humanity?
Well, actually, there are two schools of thought on that, and as a matter of defense, of course, the party of former President Duterte would, of course, argue that this cannot fall under crime against humanity because there is no widespread and systematic attack against a civilian population. Now, when we say crime against humanity to fall under the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court, one of the contextual element of the crime is that there has to be a widespread and systematic attack, and it must target a civilian population. So that's one element that the prosecution needs to establish in this particular case. So failing in which, well, the charges will not stand if they cannot establish that particular contextual element.
Okay. And Dean Ralph, an important question here would be jurisdiction. The Philippines withdrew from the ICC in 2019. Would they still have jurisdiction in this case?
Well, technically, jurisdiction, the critical date in determining jurisdictions, the time when the crimes were allegedly committed, and of course, the subject matter offenses with respect to the charges. These are the President Duterte is facing charges for crimes that were allegedly committed at the time that the Philippines was still a member of the International Criminal Court. So these are after the Philippines became a party in 2011, and at the same time prior to its to the effectivity of its withdrawal on March 17, 2019.
I know that there is also a question on when the case was actually filed. Does that affect jurisdiction?
Well, technically there are also two schools of thought about that matter, so that's also debatable. And if you would note in the five-member court which issued the warrant, the vote was 3-2, and there were two dissenting opinions, and the dissenting opinions were saying that the court can no longer acquire jurisdiction because the matter, technically the matter was initiated prior or after the withdrawal of the Philippines from the International Criminal Court. However, I believe that the prevailing opinion in international law is that the interpretation of Article 127 of the Rome Statute is that as long as the matter was already under the consideration of the court prior to the withdrawal of the Philippines, then it shall not prejudice the jurisdiction or the continuation of the authority of the court to consider matter. Now, you must understand that when we look at this, we should not look at it from the viewpoint of domestic law. In the viewpoint of domestic law, we separate the prosecution department, which is under the Department of Justice, and the judicial department, where cases are being filed. So here, you file a case before the office of the prosecution, office of the prosecutor, and then they determine if there's probable cause to file the charges in court, and then charges are filed in court. So here, when we say there is a distinction between the initiation of the charges before the office of the prosecutor and then the actual filing of the criminal case before the courts. However, in the International Criminal Court, it's different. Because when we say International Criminal Court, it consists of several organs. And the office of the prosecutor is in itself an integral part or is one of the organs of the court. So any proceedings conducted before or by the office of the prosecutor are already considered as part of the proceedings before the court. So the opinion is that as long as for example, ICC prosecutor Fatou Bensouda, when he initiated the preliminary examination and investigation in 2018, that was at least a year prior to the effectivity of the withdrawal of the Philippines from the International Criminal Court. So the reasoning of the court is that that already makes the matter under the consideration of the court, which includes the office of the prosecutor prior to the withdrawal of the Philippines. So in that case, their interpretation of Article 127, subparagraph 2 of the Rome Statute is that it shall no longer prejudice the continuation of the proceedings or the jurisdiction of the court, which it has already acquired when the matter was already under consideration of the court, particularly its organ, one of its organs, the Office of the Prosecutor, prior to the withdrawal of the Philippines.
And Dean Ralph, is there any remedy to an accused to question that? Because as you mentioned earlier, even within the ICC, there were dissenting opinions as to whether this was under consideration in time before the Philippines withdrew from the ICC. In the Philippines, we would have a remedy. For example, if the court issued a warrant of arrest, you can question that and still appeal it, and it can go all the way up to the Supreme Court if there's grave abuse of discretion. Is there something similar to provide a remedy to an accused?
Well, as part of the confirmation of charges, I'm sure the legal team of former President Duterte would be raising the question of admissibility, the question of complementarity, as part of the proceedings, in the confirmation of charges before the pretrial chamber of the International Criminal Court. So that's one contentious issue that I'm sure will also be decided by the International Criminal Court. So many experts in international law are also monitoring this matter, because this raises a very good point, and so this will actually this a precedent setting case, and it will definitely enrich our understanding of international law.
Yeah. Is this the first time that there is a head of state that's brought to the ICC after that specific state had already withdrawn?
Well, actually, I believe there's the Burundi case, which also involves more or less somewhat similar issues, if I'm not mistaken, wherein there was also a withdrawal, and then there was also a continuation of the proceedings prior to the withdrawal.
Okay. And you mentioned the term complementarity, and this is a requirement for ICC jurisdiction as well, that it will acquire jurisdiction if a state is unwilling or unable to prosecute. Do you think that this can also be a contentious point? Because prior to this arrest, there were Quadcom hearings wherein even the president, former President Duterte, appeared. And it was an investigation into, among others, the war on drugs. So do you think that this is also something that can be raised by the accused to question the jurisdiction of the ICC?
Well, technically, the question of complementarity, of course, can still be raised by the legal team of former President Duterte. But technically, it's already a matter that has been decided already by the pretrial chamber and the appeals chamber when this matter was raised. And in fact, if you remember, I think it was last year when the Philippines requested for the deferral of the proceedings on allegation that there are proceedings that are being initiated in the Philippines. There are serious investigations that are being conducted. But the decision of the appeals chamber was that it found that there is no genuine proceedings being conducted by the Philippines, as shown by the fact that there had been no cases was filed against President Duterte or any case against that targets the core policy on the war on drugs. There have been cases, minor cases about some small personalities, but the core issue has not been really taken care of by the Philippine government, and I think that's the ruling of the International Criminal Court.
Do you think, Dean Ralph, that this can also be a political strategy in that sense? Because if there were already Quadcom hearings, there were some congressmen who stated before that they have enough evidence to file a case against former President Duterte, but the decision not to file cases was more to give way to the ICC so that it can be also be more, palatable for the public to see that he's being prosecuted by the ICC instead of within the Philippines, considering the political tensions here between the Dutertes and the Marcoses?
Yeah, well, of course, this is not only a legal issue, this is also a very contentious political issue. And on both parties, of course, I'm sure there are there are political strategies that are being implemented by both sides, especially that, we're nearing the election day. Well, and of course, you can also see the changing of the stand of the present administration, because at first the stand was they expressed non-cooperation, but ultimately, of course, as we have seen, there was already there was the immediate surrender of former President Duterte immediately upon being arrested yesterday in Manila.
Okay, and I'd like to talk about the arrest itself. The arrest was enforced by General Torre, who is a Filipino, and also transmitting or surrendering former President Duterte to the ICC was done through a chartered plane here in the Philippines. So obviously there was domestic cooperation. If the Philippine government did not cooperate or refused to cooperate, would the ICC have been able to enforce the arrest that they ordered?
No, technically under the Rome Statute and under the International Criminal Court has no enforcement authority or enforcement power. So as a treaty-based court, it's only dependent upon the voluntary participation and efforts of the individual member states. So for example, the normal procedures that if there's a warrant of arrest that is issued by the pre-trial chamber, then it will be given to the given as a request to the state members who may have the person in custody or who may find the person charged or accused in their territory, and then they will be requested to take the necessary measures in order to implement the warrant of arrest issued by the International Criminal Court. Well, technically in the Philippines, we are no longer a member, although of course there's the view that we still have the obligation to cooperate because this matter was the International Criminal Court has already acquired jurisdiction over this matter prior to the withdrawal of the Philippines.
Based on your knowledge of the Rome Statute, was the arrest conducted in accordance with the provisions of the Rome Statute?
There are no specific rules. The warrant of arrest will just be sent to the individual member states, and they will be requested to take necessary measures in order to to arrest the person, take him into custody, and then to immediately surrender him to the court if if the person is found within their territory. So as to specific procedures, the Rome Statute is technically silent on the matter.
Okay, and there's a procedure also that we have under Republic Act 9851, which is the Philippine Act on Crimes Against International Humanitarian Law, Genocide, and other crimes against humanity. In this law, is there also a procedure where former President Duterte would have the opportunity to, one, examine the ICC order of arrest and then to question it?
Technically, no. The RA 9851 doesn't say anything about that. But of course, as a citizen of the Philippines under the Constitution, well, he has a right against illegal arrest, a right against illegal detention. So if he believes that there is a possible violation of his constitutional rights, then that's something that he can raise as a Filipino citizen, invoking the Bill of Rights or his rights, his fundamental rights under the Constitution.
Yesterday, I was hearing some attempts. I don't know how accurate this was, that there was an attempt by some lawyers to obtain a TRO, a temporary restraining order, from Philippine courts. Assuming that was issued, would that have any effect that would prevent the surrender or transmittal of former President Duterte to the ICC?
Well, if the Supreme Court issued a TRO, then that would have created an impasse between the executive branch and the Supreme Court, and that would have presented the Philippines in a bad light before the international community, because we have the executive department who is willing to implement the warrant of arrest, and then we have our court system which is trying to intervene. But of course, based on the Constitution, the Supreme Court has the power to intervene when constitutional rights are involved. So, but in actual scenario, there's also a possibility that the Supreme Court might decide that this is a political question, considering that the present administration, the executive branch, is already taking actions on the matter. And so for prudential considerations, out of respect to the executive branch, which is, which has the authority in the conduct of foreign relations, including our compliance with our treaty obligations under the Rome Statute when we were still a member, then for these prudential considerations, the Supreme Court may actually declare the matter as a political question.
And Dean Ruff, in the manner in which the arrest was conducted, it was really, in terms of speed, very speedy. There was even no time for the former president to go home and pack anything, considering that The Hague is a long-haul flight. Is this reasonable in a sense that there was it doesn't appear that he was hiding or had any risk of flight? There was no opportunity for him to get even the typical things that you need to pack, like your toothbrush or medicines. He's 80 years old. Is there any room for that in terms of having a request to first go home and pack your things before you are transmitted to The Hague?
Well, he could have made a request, but technically those matters would not invalidate the execution or enforcement of the warrant. So those matters will not actually affect the legality of the warrant. And in fact, we have cases like accused persons from the former Yugoslavia that were brought to the International Criminal Court on more situations. For example, there was one accused, a public official from the former Yugoslavia, who was placed on inside the trunk of a car, and then they drove from the former Yugoslavia all the way until they were able to enter a neutral territory, or a territory which was friendly to the International Criminal Court, and that was the only time that he was let out of the trunk of the car. And that situation was raised before the International Criminal Court. They claimed that there was a violation of his human rights that would let's say affect the validity of the conduct of the arrest. But the International Criminal Court ruled that while there may be some, in a way, violation of human rights, it will not affect the jurisdiction of the court nor the validity of the warrant, because the violations, if any, were not gross, according to the International Criminal Court, and they were not serious enough that in such a way that it will affect the jurisdiction of the court.
Okay, I think that it's clear that there would be no issues when it comes to the jurisdiction of the court, even in this case where it was conducted in haste, meaning the arrest itself and the transmittal of the president to The Hague. But in terms of just, I guess, the concerns of other people and the family of the president, they were worried about his health. What would happen next? Is there someone that can visit him in The Hague? And is there also a possibility for him to post bail?
Well, what will actually happen is that upon his surrender, the International Criminal Court will try to ensure that he understands the charges against him, that his rights under the Rome Statute were properly respected and observed. And then insofar as bail is concerned, there's a similar procedure, but we do not call it bail within the context of the Rome Statute, but there can be a release, interim release pending the proceedings. So that will be evaluated and assessed by the International Criminal Court. And for health reasons, there were cases wherein the International Criminal Court allowed the interim release of the accused pending trial.
And is the accused also entitled to be visited in The Hague?
Yes, there's a right to visit, especially by members of his family and also by members of his legal team.
How soon will the trial start from the time that he is taken into custody?
Normally, the trial will not immediately happen. What will happen next is actually the confirmation of charges before the pretrial chamber. So in the confirmation of charges, the Office of the Prosecutor will be presenting evidence in order to establish that there is sufficient basis to hold him for trial for each of the charges that were filed against him. So for charges that the pretrial chamber determines that are supported by sufficient grounds and evidence, then they will consist of the charges that will be presented before the actual trial chamber for the actual trial, which will be conducted.
Okay. And when it comes to the accused's right to representation, is he entitled to get a lawyer from here or at The Hague? Because it is very expensive to fly someone to The Hague and appear there for as long as the trial is conducted.
Yes, he has a right to representation, and it is his option whether he has to get a representation in the Netherlands or to bring his own legal team from the Philippines.
But the cost
in
would
fact,
have to be borne by the
even-
accused. Is that correct,
Yes.
Dean?
Yes,
So
yes, yes.
yung option niya to...
And in fact, even witnesses can be represented by their own counsels, and that's the difference between our domestic practice and the practice before the International Criminal Court. Because witnesses are also given legal personality, and therefore they can be represented by their own legal counsels.
But Dean, that could be very expensive because the trial would be in the Netherlands. If he, for example, you have an accused that cannot afford counsel in the Netherlands or even to fly someone there from the Philippines, is there any remedy for here in the Philippines? We have you can have representation that is paid for by the state. Paano po pag sa Hague?
I think there's a similar provision in the Rome Statute. The court will ensure that there is a proper legal representation for the accused.
And can you give us an idea how this trial is conducted? Who will be sitting as judges in The Hague? And how many prosecutors will there be?
Well, there's the office of the prosecutor. There's a single person office of the prosecutor, but of course, he can designate a prosecution team. So there are lots of prosecutors under the office of the prosecutor, and then some of them will be assigned to conduct the trial against former President Duterte. And then he'll be facing a five-member judge, five-member panel in the trial chamber.
In his earlier pronouncements, President Bongbong Marcos said that he does not recognize the ICC jurisdiction over former President Rodrigo Duterte. In your opinion, what made President Bongbong Marcos renege on his earlier pronouncement with regards to ICC jurisdiction? But before you answer that question, Dean Ralph will have to take a short break. At the Forefront, we'll be right back.
Good evening, I'm Pinky Webb.
The questions,
What did you uncover?
Nakita natin yung sa IPO, there was a violation of Section 8 of Republic Act 9511.
the issues.
Is there a problem with that, the present setup of the syntax?
The reason there's a 5% increase is because of inflation.
We clarify matters.
All these government agencies were actually the lowest. That's why it has to be, I hope that it will be addressed.
Pinky Web is always on point. Get to the latest stories.
The Philippines bags a historic bronze at the 2025 Asia-Pacific Women's Lacrosse Championship.
The updates.
Table tennis power duo siblings brought home medals from the WTT Youth Contender.
The scores and what to celebrate in the world of sports.
I'm Anton Rojas.
And I'm Erica Christensen.
On the scorecard,
Where sports is our business.
business is our sport.
Only here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel. Who defines strength? Who shapes the future? Who stands tall even in the face of challenges? Women of substance are everywhere. They build, they heal, they lead, they love. We celebrate you because you matter. Happy National Women's Month.
Good morning, everyone!
Let's begin your morning with these people that gives you the hottest information.
I'm Pablo Del Rosario. Let's get you up to speed with some news that you can use right now.
Rise and shine, beautiful people. I'm Ann Esses Carillo.
And I'm Monique Tuzon. Your mornings are always mo fun with us.
With excitement,
It was amazing.
positivity,
Everything is so beautifully made here.
and fun to start your day.
Only here on...
It's a beautiful day.
Welcome back at the Forefront, and we still have with us Dean Ralph Sarmiento. Dean Ralph, in his earlier pronouncement, President Bongbong Marcos said that he does not recognize the ICC jurisdiction over former President Rodrigo Duterte. In your opinion, what made President Bongbong Marcos change his earlier pronouncements with regards to ICC jurisdiction?
Well, of course, I can only guess, no. But obviously, of course, it's a political consideration, and of course, we all know that and we have witnessed the souring of the relationship between the Dutertes and the Marcos from the time of the election and up to now, and of course, I'm sure that explains the change in the way this is being handled by the present administration.
As an international law expert, do you think there's a possibility or a risk that the ICC or international courts like this can be used as a tool, a political tool, when it comes to, like what you said today, like there seems to have been a souring of relationship, but in the future, being able to use this as a tool to bring someone to ICC or to get rid of them from the country?
Well, technically puede, but of course, it also depends. Of course, you can use this as a tool unless, of course, crimes were indeed committed, and the crimes are within the jurisdiction of an international court like the International Criminal Court. And of course, there are rules on how the court acquired jurisdiction. For example, under the Rome Statute, if you are not a member state, then that's a big challenge, because the court cannot just acquire jurisdiction for crimes that are not committed within the territory of a member state, unless, of course, they were committed by a national member state, even if they were committed within the territory of a non-member state. Or when there is another possibility is when there is a referral of the crimes or investigation by the Security Council of the United Nations to the to the Office of the Prosecutor. So I don't think that anyone can just initiate proceedings before the International Criminal Court, unless, of course, there is sufficient grounds for actual crimes that have been committed, and they should be within the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court.
But in your opinion, Dean Ralph, do you think that the Philippines will join the ICC again in the future? Because now we've seen that this has been used in order to prosecute a former head of state of the Philippines. But for future heads of state, even the current head of state, President Marcos, he might be afraid that this might come back to bite him in the future. So there is, to a certain extent, some incentive not to rejoin the ICC so that you won't be subjected to their jurisdiction in the future for things that you do, even if it amounts to crimes against humanity.
Well, I believe that your observation is correct, and I'm sure that we do not see the Philippines rejoining the International Criminal Court in the foreseeable future, and we might be joining, for example, United States of America, Israel, and many other countries which are not actually members of the International Criminal Court.
Yes. And Dean Ralph, can you walk us through what will happen next? So now, President Duterte is in the jurisdiction of the ICC. With the trial, should it proceed, how long could it take?
It really depends on the number of witnesses, the presentation of evidence, scheduling of the court, availability of the witnesses. It may take years, of course. The normal procedure is that it will take years. And of course, that's only the initial stage will be the confirmation of charges. And even just the confirmation of charges, it might take a year or two before the pre-trial chamber. And then after that, they will have to decide whether or not confirm the charges against former President Duterte. And then after that, the matter will be presented or will be submitted to the trial chamber. So the trial chamber will now be the one which will be conducting the actual trial, hearing of witnesses, presentation of evidence, and everything. And then even after the trial chamber makes a decision on the matter, there will still be the appeals chamber. So the appeals chamber, the decision can still be appealed to the appeals chamber, and it will have a final say on the guilt or innocence of the accused.
Okay, so that sounds like a really long time. From what I've been reading, it can go on the average 8 years to 10 years. Yes. So paano po yun in that, you mean in that period, si former President Duterte will just really be in the Netherlands?
Yes, po.
And incarcerated po?
Yes, po.
What is the remedy if you're wrongfully accused? So I looked at past cases. We have, for example, Laurent Gbagbo of Cote d'Ivoire, and he was tried in the ICC. The trial took around 10 years, but then in the end, it led to an acquittal. So is there a remedy to someone who was accused but then eventually acquitted? Because again, the costs involved in the trial, but the deprivation of liberty as well. Here in the Philippines, you can claim damages for wrongful prosecution. But in the ICC, do you have that kind of remedy?
I'm not really sure about that specifically. If there's for example, some sort of a reparation or damages that is given to them, I can check that out. But what's important is that when you say malicious prosecution before the International Criminal Court, you can say that there was a malicious prosecution if there were at least probable cause or valid grounds to hold him for trial. So as long as there's that valid ground or at least probable cause to hold him for trial, even if the person is eventually acquitted, so that only means that justice has been served by the judgment of acquittal or declaration of innocence. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there was a malicious prosecution or an unjust prosecution before the International Criminal Court.
Okay, so it's not as clear, right? Like whether you can claim damages or any type of compensation from anyone. And in this case, you mentioned earlier that there's no equivalent to a bail when it comes to the ICC.
There can be an interim release.
Interim release. But do they impose like an amount that should be paid before that interim release?
Normally, it's not the usual bail that we have in the domestic law. So it's still it's a matter that will be decided by the court, subject to the terms and conditions. For example, they will have to ensure and assess whether there's the risk of flight and everything. So even during interim release, it will still be under the supervision of the International Criminal Court.
Okay, and what grounds are normally considered in order to grant an interim release?
Well, health reasons could be a good ground. The grounds are not specified under the Rome Statute, but of course, for example, if there is an undue delay in the proceedings, you may ask for interim release pending trial. And especially if the delay is being caused by the prosecution and without the fault of the accused. So that can be a good ground for interim release.
And yung interim release po, would that allow former President Duterte, should that happen, back to the Philippines?
Hindi po.
Pagka-interim release, saan po sila pwede pumunta?
It will still be within the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court or particularly within Netherlands, and it will still be under the supervision of the International Criminal Court.
Okay, so meron po bang chance na pwede siya in a country that's a member of the ICC?
Normally hindi po, because they have to ensure that he would be present in the course of the proceedings.
Okay. And would you know if the trial is conducted every day?
It really depends on the scheduling of the court, because well, we all know that there are a lot of pending cases before the court, and some of the cases are actually being televised, telecast live by the International Criminal Court. May mga proceedings sila that are that we can see live.
Okay, Dean Ralph, are there other cases pending right now in the ICC, and are they heard by the same composition of judges, or does this change per case?
It actually changes per case po. Because you can actually, just like in a jury trial, there will be a confirmation. You can challenge the judges and everything. So eventually, when the court is composed, and then so it will be the one which will be conducting the trial.
Mm-hmm. And are you aware of any other cases that are currently being heard by the ICC?
There are lots of cases po are being heard, and makikita po natin yun sa website ng International Criminal Court. There is makikita po natin yung mga actual status of all the cases, including yung mga documents, yung mga pleadings nila, yung mga memorials and memorandum nila. Nandun po lahat sa website. And the International Criminal Court has been very transparent about all these cases.
Are there several cases that have led to a conviction?
Opo. Yeah. Conviction, meron din po ang apitan.
Pagka po may conviction, saan napupunta yung convicted person? Do they get incarcerated in Netherlands as well? Or in what country are they sent to for incarceration?
Well, under the Rome Statute, when there's a conviction and there is a sentence that will be by imprisonment, normally the International Criminal Court will issue a call to the member states if they are willing and able to administer or to administer or enforce the sentence against the convicted person. Now, from the list of volunteer states that have expressed their willingness or desire to enforce the sentence, then the court will choose. But if there are no states which would volunteer, then the convicted person will have to serve sentence at the facilities at The Hague.
Could the Philippines volunteer to be the state to take custody?
Not anymore po, because we are no longer a member state.
Okay, so for the family of former President Duterte, the chances of him being back in the Philippines seems very slim based on our discussion. Because from now, even if he is released in the interim, he won't be allowed to go back to the Philippines. It has to be in the Netherlands. But then, if it leads to a conviction, kailangan sa ICC member country siya pumunta as an option to serve his sentence.
Okay, that's
Okay. Dean Ralph, ano po yung mga types of sentences that can be meted out by the ICC?
Well, the maximum sentence, imprisonment that can be imposed by the International Criminal Court is a imprisonment of 30 years. Unless, of course, for very serious offense or depending on the gravity, then the International Criminal Court may also impose life imprisonment. But the maximum normally is 30 years.
And going back to the trial, there will be witnesses that can be called by the ICC. Paano po yung mga witnesses from the Philippines? Who will pay for the expenses of bringing them to The Hague?
That I'm not really sure on how will that be facilitated. But what I know from mga nakausap ko ng mga individuals is that there are international organizations that are helping out the victims and the witnesses, and I'm sure they will also be the ones which will facilitate the appearance of these witnesses before the International Criminal Court.
And Dean Ralph, are you aware of the status of other cases that have been filed with the ICC? We have, for example, a case filed against Netanyahu of Israel and also Putin of Russia. Ano na pong nangyari sa mga cases na yon?
Well, ang problem po, of course, you must understand that Israel is not a party to the Rome Statute in the same way that Russia is not also a party to the Rome Statute. So even if there are pending warrants of arrest against them, these heads of states, it will be basically impossible, to enforce them without the cooperation of the state. And under the Rome Statute, these non-party states are not under, they do not have any obligation under international law, particularly under the Rome Statute, to enforce the sentence or to surrender the person requested or the person accused to the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court.
And you have the United States, for example. From what I understand, President Trump also issued an order that would sanction anyone who cooperates with the ICC with respect to a U.S. national or an ally of the U.S. So do you think that this affects also the ability of ICC to be effective when it comes to policing heads of state?
Of course, but that's a big challenge to the International Criminal Court. And you must also understand that the United States is also not a party to the International Criminal Court. Now, technically, when it's not a party to the International Criminal Court, so if a crime under the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court will be committed or allegedly committed within the jurisdiction of the United States, so the International Criminal Court cannot acquire jurisdiction. However, if a U.S. national let's say, is accused of committing a war crime or a crime against humanity within the territorial jurisdiction of a member state or a state party to the International Criminal Court, then technically the International Criminal Court can acquire jurisdiction. So it will depend. For example, if that national, U.S. national, is within their territory, and then there is a request for his, or there's the issuance of a warrant of arrest. So if he's found within the jurisdiction of a state party, then it will depend on that state party if it will enforce the warrant and surrender the person, the U.S. national, to the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court.
Would you know, Dean Ralph, how many members of the ICC are left, or how many countries are currently members of the ICC?
Unfortunately, I haven't checked that, but we can check that out.
Is China also a member?
No.
Not also. Okay, so it seems like a lot of the big economies are not members of the ICC. When it comes to the ICC, how does it ensure impartiality in its proceedings?
Well, we can only trust that yung mga judges in the International Criminal Court, these are really considered to be experts in international law. So academically speaking, their backgrounds, for example, we have former dean of the UP College of Law who was appointed and who has sat as judge in the International Criminal Court. We have Raul Pangalangan.
Yes.
And of course, we cannot question the standing and integrity of the members of the International Criminal Court or the judges in the International Criminal Court.
Yeah,
So we can only rely on the fact
was
that these are Pangalangan.
Yes, Pangalangan. He was a dean
po.
when I was a law student in UP. But is there a proceeding within the ICC to question if you find that one of the judges might be partial or biased? Because here in the Philippines, you can file and ask the judge to inhibit. Is there a similar process in the ICC?
Opo. You can raise a question on the, for example, on partiality question. You can ask them to inhibit themselves.
And is the same composition of judges right now that will hear the case of former President Duterte the same people that also issued the order of arrest?
That I'm not sure.
Okay, because
I'll have to look.
in that case, then you can technically question also whether they're impartial, but I don't know the grounds also if that would qualify for questioning.
But I could only, I could only say, for example, because I'm pre-trial chamber, there are several pre-trial chambers. So there's a pre-trial chamber 1, pre-trial chamber 2. So I guess siguro they will be different.
Okay. And what do you think would be the effect of this arrest as it comes at a time when we're nearing the 2025 midterm elections?
Well, of course, this will be part of the consideration of the people when they go to the polling places. And well, as you will see, there's an explosion of expression of sentiments and opinions on both sides, pro and anti, those who are in favor of the arrest and surrender of Duterte to the ICC. There are those, and of course the supporters of former President Duterte. So I'm sure that this will be an issue that will affect and impact the results of the interim elections.
And what potential benefits do you see will the country get out of this?
Well, insofar as, our standing in the international legal community, I would say that it was affected when we withdrew from the Rome Statute. And with our cooperation now, siguro it's one way of, showing to the international legal community, at least to the plenipotentiaries of state parties of the International Criminal Court, that, we are not a state that would allow impunity. And then we are also serious in the prosecution and, in ensuring that at least giving justice a chance in order to establish and to find out if indeed crimes against humanity, particularly of murder, were indeed committed as part of the campaign, the drug war campaign.
Dean Ralph, what would be your answer to those who say that this has been also used as a form of political persecution?
Well, of course, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. And of course, this is a very sensitive issue on social media right now. The political considerations are different. I've been trying to distance myself from the political considerations, and I've been trying to give the people a balanced view. Simply from a scholarly perspective. Actually, yung pinipresent ko nga sa Facebook parang pang bar exams lang. So parang walang, I've been trying na talagang walang political considerations. Because I know that many of the legal experts which are either aligned to the Marcoses or to the Dutertes, they will also be giving their own opinions on the matter and legal analysis. But more likely, of course, they will be tainted or biased because of their political convictions. So what I've been trying to do since yesterday is at least, give a balanced opinion and presentation of the issues and arguments on this particular issue.
Okay. And Dean Ralph, finally, what would save former President Rodrigo Duterte from all of this?
Well, I think he has to come up with a good defense and a good legal team. And I can see that this is actually going to trial. Then I think best option right now is to really prepare himself for a full-blown trial before the International Criminal Court.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dean Ralph Sarmiento. And we appreciate, as you said, your very informative but also unbiased opinion.
Thank you, po. And regards to your mom.
Yes, I will tell her po. Salamat. Salamat, Dean. Former President Rodrigo Duterte's arrest by the ICC raises serious concerns about accountability, sovereignty, and the rule of law. While some see it as a victory for justice, others argue that it undermines national jurisdiction and fuels political division. This case will test the strength of international legal institutions and the Philippines' commitment to human rights and due process. Be timely informed, be insightful of the news. Always stay at the forefront. Join us again tomorrow for meaningful conversations that would help you form an objective personal opinion. This is Attorney Karen Jimeno. Thank you for spending your hour with us.